Is 2026 going for you? I'm about to tell you how it's going for me. I'm Melissa Franks, your host of the Opt-in podcast, and this is where we go from surviving to thriving in business. Now, like all of you, I am a business owner. And like many of you, probably, I set goals for 2026. Now, if you are new here, what you may not know is that I go through a goal setting process early to mid fourth quarter for the following year. The reason that I do that is it gives me plenty of time to really think about how I want to break it apart, what I want it to look like, what I want to have happen. And you also know, probably, if you've been here for a while, that I always recommend that you look at your annual revenue target as just a result. It's just a data point. If you do all of the right things in order to achieve that, you're good to go. So I always recommend, and you can find some podcasts where I talk about that you set other goals that will help you get there. And so I set a revenue target because that was where I wanted to kind of frame my brain. And I was also reading a book by Benjamin Hardy at the same time called The Science of Scaling. It's a great book. You should go get it. Full disclaimer, he's absolutely selling his coaching offer in that entire book. So if you don't want to read a sales book, skip it. But there's some really good nuggets in there. So whether you want to be coached by Ben Hardy and his team or not, you still get some good nuggets. Anyway, as I was reading that book, really one of the things that he talks about there is the concept of an impossible goal. And coming from the corporate world, we lived in a land of stretch goals, which weren't impossible. They were just significantly more difficult than whatever the goal was. And the reason the stretch goal was created was just a performance management trick. Basically, the reality is that stretch goals in corporate are built so you can just see how much you can get out of your people. That's it. It really has the leaders and high achievers rise to the top, and then it shows you kind of where the norm is. So as you are doing performance management, you're deciding on raises, you're deciding on promotions, you're doing all those things, you can kind of see where the bell curve goes, right? And I was in corporate for decades, very, very long time, my entire, professional career until 2022. And so that's my frame of reference. So I had created a stretch goal. I had said $3 million in 2026 stretch goal. I can run the math, I can look at the numbers, I can figure out how to go from point A to point B. And just to keep in mind, I look at the business in two ways. I look at our business as contracted value, so contracts in hand, signed, active clients, how much is that going to bring into the business? And then I look at it as cash collected. And cash collected is reality. It's what actually happened. You can't count anything that did not hit your bank account, right? And so because we are a management consulting firm, really, if you want a professional services business, we have to look at it both ways. We have to look at what we're contracted to do and what we aspirationally hope is going to come into the business and then what actually happened. And so we ended 2025 cash collected a little below $1 million. We had contracted value well over $1 million that year, so we kind of rang the bell on 7 figures. It was incredibly exciting. Never meant for that to happen last year, as you guys have all heard before on other podcasts from me. And if you haven't, you can go back and kind of look at the year in review one. And so I said, you know what, a 3X, more than 3X of cash collected, this $3 million goal, that's our stretch goal. That's where we're going to hit it. Realistically, I thought we could probably get somewhere in the 2 million range, but we were going to set the goal. And then the next immediate thing that I said was, how do we get there? And where am I specifically being the constraint and bottleneck? Because the reality is that last year in 2025, this time last year, I'm recording this on April 10th, so right before you hear this, I was a solopreneur. There was nobody else in the business aside from me. And shortly thereafter, I began to add to the team, and then the team has grown quite significantly since then. But a year ago, it was just me. So I was everything. I was fulfilling customers. I was the sales team. I was the ads manager. I'm the social media manager. I'm the brand and creative director. I'm accounting, right? You name it. I was doing every single function because I was just a solopreneur. I was basically a 1099 with an LLC. And that was cool because my objective always had been to just make enough money to live. When I started this business, my goal was to make $10,000 a month. If I could just get $10,000 in cash a month, I could survive. I could feed the kids, I could pay the mortgage, we would be okay. We would not be living well. We would not be taking vacations. We would be bargain shopping, but we would be okay. And so when I started this business in October of 2023, the goal was just to make $10,000 a month. It was not anything fancier than that. It was really just how do we survive and move forward. Fast forward, I really realized about this time last year that we were able to offer a solution to business owners that didn't exist out there. And we were able to offer a solution in a new and different way to business owners. And as a person that builds businesses, that lit a fire in me. And I'm like, oh, well, we've already rung the bell on ensuring that we have at least $10,000 a month in income. And I had been reinvesting in the business, so I still wasn't bringing much home income-wise, just enough for us to be able to live our lives. And I was reinvesting in the business because I knew I wanted to grow this thing. I just didn't know what that was going to look like. And so this time last year, a little bit later, we started growing the team, started adding more clients, and I was still all the things. So as I wrapped up the end of 2025, the team was pretty substantial. And I have 3 employees that work inside of the business, and I was still taking on clients. I was still the sales team. I was still the advertising team. I was still the brand. I was still the creative director. I was still the one doing all the PR, right? Like I was all of the things. And what became very abundant was that if I wanted to hit the targets for 2026, I needed to start firing myself from jobs. And if any of you listening to this today are a business owner, you can sympathize with the agony that is, because you just start to do math. And you're like, that's going to be expensive. This is going to be a problem. And so I sat down and I said, where am I just losing my life? Literally, where am I losing my life? And where am I at risk as the business grows for stalling out? And one of the things, and it was like a running joke within my entrepreneur friend group, my website was horrible. The content of the website was great, but it was like ugly. I don't even have another way to describe it. Absolutely ugly. And so the first thing that I did is I said, well, I need somebody to rebrand the business. This actually needs to look like the adult professional business that all of us are on the team. It needs to reflect the services that we provide. She needs to glow up. She needs to not be built by Melissa Franks. She needs to not be using all of the colors in the Crayola box that everybody hates and breaks. So let's get it done. So we hired a marketing agency to rebrand the business. Not only to rebrand the business, but to actually do something with our social media on the business side, because I think we have 60 followers on Instagram. Like nothing's going on over there. So that was the first decision that we made in December of 2025 to invest in our future. And that was a pretty big, sizable investment. And then the second thing that I realized was that in order to have the business continue to grow the way that it was, my personal brand also needed to evolve. And this is something that is a super hot topic right now. You'll be able to find all sorts of influencers on social media talking about this, and business coaches, and etc. But I want to spend a little bit of time decomposing this. Specifically, I'm a founder-led business. So right now, my name often is more recognizable than the business name of On Call COO, and that is okay. That's because I'm out doing PR. It's because my social channels are where the ads are running from. It's how our website is built. I'm the face of the business. So you think Melissa Franks, you think On Call COO. They are synonymous. My ultimate goal is that On Call COO stands on its own. It's its own brand. It's known. It's understood. It's a industry leader. It's where everybody wants to come partner when they get to the right size and have the right needs. And in order for that to happen, 2 things need to occur simultaneously. A, we've invested in the marketing agency to really brand that brand and stand it up and start running the socials and doing all the things. And B, I need to continue to evolve, mature, and propagate my personal brand. Because until that business brand gets up and going, the best way to build the business is through my personal brand, which is why we expanded PR services and we're paying more for PR this year than we did last year. We're paying double. It's why I hired a creative director, an agency full of creative directors to really help with the brand. This is where my stylists come into play. This is where the brand photography comes into play. This is where leveraging tools like AI and Claude in order to get my brand voice to something that like other people can use without me actually needing to write and create and do all the things. This is where all of that's coming into play. First, we invested in the marketing agency to stand up the brand, the business brand. Then we also invested additionally in public relations, get more exposure. And in order to get more exposure, we also needed other things to mature and be adult. And so the very first thing that I did is say, I'm not a creator, not by a long shot. I am an operator. You do not want me doing you don't even want me drawing picture. Let's be real clear. That is not something that I do. When I was in a sorority in college, I outsourced like all of the creative gift things that needed to be made. I just paid other people in the organization to do it. So I did not have to do it. That's literally where we are. So all of that creative got outsourced, and that was a huge relief. I'm still the social media manager for my personal brand. We need to solve that problem, but at least for now, most of that was handed over. And so then I said, okay, so where else am I the bottleneck? And something had to give. I could either fulfill clients or I could take sales calls. But the reality was I couldn't do both, because what was happening is if I had a full client roster, my calendar was full and I couldn't take sales calls. If I can't take sales calls, business can't grow. What was also true was I didn't have enough time or capacity to build the scripts and the SOPs and do the training to bring a sales team in. And so the decision became, well, what I can replace myself doing is fulfilling customers. What I can't replace myself doing right now is sales. And so towards the end of 2025 and beginning of 2026, we all made a concerted decision that Melissa was no longer going to take clients. You'll see how that evolves in just a second. And that was a huge relief, because what ended up happening is I took over 25 sales calls in January. It was the most sales calls I had ever taken in my life. And what we also realized during that period of time was that there was demand at lower tiers, which we could fulfill with some of our staff, and we were missing some market share. Same services, smaller business structure. And so being able to free myself up and hand over all of the marketing things, hand over customer fulfillment to other people, I was able to really focus on one of the growth levers, which was sales. And I was able to identify a market opportunity for which we're continuing to test. That all became available because I had the bandwidth and capacity, because I actually retired myself from doing some things in the business. In fact, by doing that, February was our first 100K month. Now remember, in 2023, fourth quarter, my goal was to have consistent 10K months. That was it. And here we are, February of 2026, annexing that. Brain explode, like unfreaking believable. And I knew this is just the beginning. Like the momentum has changed. What else do we need to do? And so we stuck with it. So the month of February didn't change the script. I wasn't fulfilling clients except for a very small roster of clients that I had. Everybody was getting the new clients. I was taking a ton of sales calls. Things were humming along. And then I had an in-person event in February. And what we realized was that there's two ways to pour gasoline on the business fire. One of them is paid ads. Going to do it until I die. I believe in it wholeheartedly. It takes work and refinement and all the things, but that is what has given us a 7-figure business. The end. Full stop. Never would have happened. Would have crashed and burned without paid advertising. But what I also realized was that attending the right events where the right target clients are in the room, it helps me have conversations that also lead to sales discussions and also lead to new clients. And we knew theoretically this was true. But February was a great opportunity to really be able to stress test and say, that's the case. And so it allows my public relations firm to say, like, where should we find speaking opportunities? Where should we find panel discussions? Where should we just maybe even be an attendee or a booth sponsor or whatever? And so that test in February helped us confirm our hunch that attending physically in-person events and doing those things would actually augment the paid advertising. And that learning was incredibly important because back in December, we had agreed to do a trade show in Miami based on nothing other than like, seems like a good idea. And so being at that event and like having those conversations and seeing the business flow through from there, it really certified that that trade show maybe was a good idea. Maybe not, we don't know, but it really certified that that made sense. And that's what we should do. So we rolled into March kind of guns blazing. The ads are working. I don't have clients. I'm taking a ton of sales calls. Events are bringing in leads. The machine is turning. We had 5 COOs on staff. The team is a team of 15. We are constantly interviewing and bringing more people in, and all the things. The other thing that was happening simultaneously is because we had so many clients, different industries, different profiles, all the things, we were learning some things about gaps in our contracts. And so we were adjusting our client contracts as we go. We were making changes to be more fortified. We were learning a ton of things. And I had the capacity and bandwidth to be making those observations and reacting in real time. It was like the best case scenario for the business. And then paid ads stopped working. Stopped. I woke up one morning and I'm like, Google hasn't spent any money in a week. We were spending hundreds of dollars a day, and then Google was like, $30, $30, and no sales calls were getting booked. And there was a moment in my head, and you all might have been here, which is why I'm sharing the story, where I was like, gigs up. I don't know what to do. And then, because I am not a panicker, I'm a solution person, I said, I don't think that that's the case. So something has changed. I missed something, or this is telling me something. And here is what is really fascinating and interesting about what happened, is that if I had just been watching my revenue, so if I had just been focusing on my revenue, because what happened was we went from, 100K to 130K, we literally inching our way up, right? If I had just focused on that, I'd be like, hey, we're growing. We're not having a problem. We're hitting our revenue targets. We're blowing them out of the water. We're going faster than I thought. But I was looking at other indicators. I was also paying attention to how many sales calls were getting booked on my calendar every week. I was looking at how many showed up and how many actually moved to the next step of the process. I was looking at how much traffic was hitting my website. I was looking at how much money I was spending on ads and if the ads were performing the way that I wanted to. And so immediately upon there being an issue, not because I saw revenue decline, but because I saw traffic and ad spend decline and sales calls literally shrivel up, I knew we had a front end issue. And when I talk to all of you a lot about this and the business owners that we work with, it's not enough to just see how much cash you have coming into your business. You actually need to know what the leading indicators are. And for us, it takes us about 6 weeks to go from sales call book to client. And because we know that, what was happening in March was actually not going to impact March or April, it was going to impact May. And the last thing that I wanted to see was the business nosedive in May. So we had to fix the problem. And remember, I'm still running ads. I haven't fired myself. So I went back into the program that we have been following for a very long time. I went back and, look, what do I need to do? What do I need to check? Used Claude, and we had a whole conversation and we checked some things. Kicked the can with the coaches that I have in the Paid Ads Academy, because we still continue to be in that mastermind, and we all came to the same conclusion. And so we adjusted 2 things simultaneously. We said that, we're going to spend more money. We doubled our daily spend, and we're going to increase our budget to get a call booked. And it took about a week, maybe a little bit longer, and all of a sudden it started to spend. And then it spent some more, and then it spent some more. And before I knew it, we were on fire. The problem was that Google was just spending willy-nilly. And so now we're almost back in the place that we were in late 2024 when we started running ads, where we're having to adjust and fine-tune and get specific and do all of the things. And I share that to say that I could have panicked and I could have said ads aren't working anymore and abandon ship and find a new strategy. And it wasn't that. It was just that we needed to react to what was happening, that it's a little bit more expensive for us to get a lead now than it used to be, and that's okay because the cost per lead is still quite good. And we just need to be paying attention and monitoring. And that's why it's so important to make sure that your house is in order. I would have only seen that because I was not taking clients. The only reason that I had awareness about that, and the only reason I was able to do something, and the only reason I was able to babysit it even now today, was because I had made a decision way back when, the end of 2025, to not take on more clients. Right at the same time that all of this was happening, I created a goal for second quarter. And my goal for second quarter was to retire myself from sales, because I now had enough bandwidth to be able to say, I can write some scripts, I can find the right person, I can do the coaching and training. This is the next bottleneck I need to get myself out of, because the reality was I was still constrained by my calendar. And in my household this spring, is busy season. It's baseball season. So I get into the car at 2:00 in the afternoon, and then that's all bets are off. So I have this very narrow window to take sales calls, and that's not going to help anybody long term either. And that was one of the parts of diagnosis that we went through with the Google Ads performance was like, is it my calendar or is it the ads? Clearly it was the ads. It was not my calendar. Calendar also becomes an issue. But I made a decision, like a definitive decision at that point, that by at some point in second quarter, we were going to bring on somebody to do sales. And we're actively working on that right now. And so as we are moving closer to that stretch goal of 3 million or our impossible goal that we've got out there, which I'm not going to mention right now, the things that I am actively doing as a founder is I am identifying as quickly as possible where I can retire myself from a role or function and bring in somebody that's better. I am not the best salesperson in the world. In fact, we are doing like no follow-up with leads at all, which is a dumpster fire and like the worst thing to possibly be doing. And so we're solving that problem. We're solving that problem not by me not sleeping. We're solving that problem by getting somebody in to do it. This is an important lesson because I practice what I preach. So when I tell clients to do these same things, you're actually watching me live and in real time do the same things. We're actively chasing a goal right now to have 200K months, and we're going to do it in the second quarter. We're well on track for it. I'm very confident that we're going to hit it. And at the same time, that's going to give us the room and the capacity to bring on the sales professionals that we need in order to just really exploit this opportunity to the full extent. And as we move forward into the second quarter, we were starting to set the goals for the second quarter. I also made some different decisions. We had some opportunities come through that required me to get back into client fulfillment. And I was excited about it because understanding that I wasn't doing marketing anymore, I had PR was in hand and we were going to bring in a sales team. I then said, you know what, for the right business profile, for the right relationship, for the right opportunity, it makes sense for me to jump back in and work with clients in a new and smarter and different way. And while things are a little bit hairy right now because we haven't hired the sales team and I'm back in client fulfillment mode, it was intentional because there was a trade-off of capacity and work. And I think that sometimes this is where we get a little bit stuck in business, is that we make a decision that we're no longer doing anything and we don't allow ourselves the opportunity to say, well, maybe for a season, I do need to be doing that thing again. And if I do need to be doing that thing again for a season, what do I need to take off my plate? What ends up happening is we try to do it all anyway, and we just slide backwards and we do it all bad. And the last thing that I would ever want to do is work with a client and do a bad job. And so the next thing, and I don't want to kill the business by ending the sales pipeline. And so then you have to come up with the right solution. And it's hard. It's not easy to say, where am I being short-sighted? Where do I need to make a better decision? Where do I need to just admit that I can't do all of the things? But that's the difference between a business that scales and a business that stalls. Is having the self-awareness to be able to say, what season are we in, what is needed from me now, and what can I move off of my plate somewhere else in order to do the things that are highest priority. The reality is I ended up having 3 weeks straight of travel at the end of March going into April. That was not planned. There was 1 week that was planned. And then 1 week became 2, and then 2 became 3, and it just was what it was. And because I don't have that sales team yet, what that also means is that there was a sales call here and a sales call here, but barely any sales calls. Google's spending the money, and calls are getting booked starting next week and a few other weeks out because I had to open up my calendar so much, and we don't know what's going to happen with that. Typically, we don't like to schedule calls 3 weeks out because people don't show up. So we're running a little bit of an experiment right now. But what I do know now, travel done, at least for the next few weeks, is that priority number 1, aside from fulfilling those clients, is getting the salesperson in ASAP, because I can't continue to do these things running simultaneously. And I wanted to give you kind of this glimpse of how first quarter unwound and give you kind of a real accounting of what was happening, because I think sometimes when you're sitting in the owner's seat, you're wondering why it's so hard. You're wondering why you can't figure it out. You're wondering why you're always behind. And it's because things change. I had a period of time in January where I was like, this is rad. This is rad. The business is growing. I'm taking a ton of sales calls. I've got everything managed. I'm following up with people. I'm doing all the things. I had a brief moment where it was humming. And then things changed. And I had to adjust. And I got sick and like all this other stuff was going on, and I had to ask myself again, and I had just asked myself in December, and had asked myself again, where do I not need to be doing things? Where do I need to remove myself? Where do I need to make different choices? How do I need to do this differently? I have extremely high ambition. I see the future of this business, and it is massive. Our mission is to just ensure that more small business owners are successful for the long term, whatever that means for them. And in order for us to do that, we need to grow. We can't do it with a lean, small team that nobody knows about. And so I am constantly interrogating, where am I not needed? Where can I pull myself out? Where can I do things differently? Where can I ask for help? Where is somebody better? And that is the muscle that I'm inviting you to build. That is the message. If you get nothing else out of this podcast today, and you've been listening to this for over 20 minutes, is you've got to evaluate. You've got to stop and pause and say, here's exactly what's happening. Here's the facts. Here's the data. Here's the situation. Is there anything I could be doing differently right now? Is there anything that I should not be doing anymore? Is there anything that somebody else should be doing? And then act. Because the reason that we went from $250,000 cash collected to well on track, probably to be somewhere near 2 this year, if not higher than that, is because I am constantly iterating my role and what is happening in the business, because I am paying attention to leading indicators, because I am understanding what is going on, and I'm addressing it head on. I am not afraid to act. Now, you may be thinking, Melissa, that is easy for you because what you do, what you are best at, is growing and scaling businesses. You're not wrong. But you can do this exercise on your own, because often you know the answer. Often you know what you need to retire from. Often you know who you need to give something to. Often you know where your time is getting wasted and where you need to reallocate it. You just don't want to. It might be an ego thing. It might be a trust thing. It might be an overwhelm thing. It might be you need somebody else to give you permission. All of those may be true. But what I am doing actively here are things that you can do on your own. You don't need my business acumen and you don't need my experience to be able to do it. Now, with that said, of course, we're here. So if you want some help, if you want some guidance, if you want some advice, we can do that sort of thing in a 90-minute strategy call. You don't need to become a retainer client. You don't need to be here for the long term. We can, within 90 minutes, help you see the forest through the trees and tell you what to do and where to focus and who to hire and how to delegate, because we're really, really good at it. But I want to invite you to do the exercise yourself first and see if you can find the answers. It is a myth that you build the thing and you set it up and then it runs like clockwork. That is just not true. It is not true in multi-billion-dollar corporations, which I have been inside of and I have broken apart and I have sold. And it is not true in $500,000 businesses. Circumstances change. What you thought was true is no longer true. Where you need to focus changes all of the time, and you need to be nimble and strategic with that. You also need to not be distracted. And the last thing that I will say as I round this out is you also need to know when to take a break. I am coming off of 3 weeks of travel. I have been on the road, home for a second to repack literally, and back on the road. And I have been in 3 different states. I have been all over the country. And what I also know is I'm going to start hating this business if I don't turn it off. So this podcast on Friday, April 10th is one of the last things I'm doing today. I have 2 more half-an-hour meetings and then I'm cutting bait and running. And I'm not opening my laptop at all weekend. Why? Because I need to rest my brain. Because I can start to see that the things that are just the things with business in general are starting to get more irritating than they should be. Because I want to spend time with my kids. Because I know that in order for next week to crush it, I need to be my best self. And I know right now I am tired. And we often sacrifice rest in order to move the business forward. And I am telling you right now that after all of my years in experience, after being that human that literally sat and was and prayed and said, one day I hope I can make $10,000 a month doing this thing, and is now 10x that and more. The secret sauce is putting it down sometimes. The secret sauce is getting sleep and moving your body, whatever that means for you, and eating well and taking care of yourself. You will hear many business coaches out there in the world say that you need to hustle your heart out, and you need to sleep on the floor, and you need to just grind until you get there. And I'm here to tell you, through a lot of life experience, and I'm older than all of them, it's just not true. Are there some periods of time where you have to hustle? Sure. I just traveled for 3 weeks straight. Just told you. Still running the business, still fulfilling clients, not sleeping a lot. But you have to know that that's a limited period of time until you can get yourself back to homeostasis in the right space. So I didn't want to do this disservice for you to tell you to like go and prioritize and delegate and do all this stuff and keep moving, blah, 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 without me telling you. Also, success comes from being still. Success comes from turning your brain off. Success comes from stepping back, because that's where awareness comes from. That's where course correction and iteration comes from. We are not built to be on all of the time. And so I am going to attend some sporting events with my kids. I am going to stream something on Netflix and force myself to watch it, which is super hard for me because I do not really do that. I don't sit still. I don't watch stuff. It's just not my jam. I'm going to sleep. And I'm going to come back in on Monday ready and raring to go because I know the importance of rest. So I hope you got some nuggets just about like where we are and what first quarter looked like and some decisions I made and cross streets. I had to make a choice on whether I was going to go right or left. And if you need help with any of this, we are here to help you. You can always book a free consultation call and we can have a chat. You can book a 90-minute strategy call and we can just solve the problems. You can be amazed at what we get done in 90 minutes. But either way, the goal of this was so that you knew where we were sitting and that you knew that you weren't alone. And I see you. Until next time, friends, please know that you are wise and you are strong and you are capable, and I believe in you.